Hello, everybody, and welcome to not just another white woman's podcast, The Beauty of Transformation. It's a podcast interviewing interesting women of all cultures and backgrounds from all over the world who share their insights about their transformations in their lives. These women have deep wisdom about life's challenges and joys and how they got to where they are today. Breaking down the patriarchy, this podcast also delves into topics that build us up as women and those who identify as women. And I am going to introduce our guest today, Elyse Resch. She is a nutrition therapist in private practice with 43 years of experience, specializing in eating disorders, intuitive eating, and health at every size. She is the co-author of Intuitive Eating, now in its fifth edition in process, the Intuitive Eating Workbook and the Intuitive Eating Card Deck, 50 bite-sized ways to make peace with food. Elyse is also the author of the Intuitive Eating Workbook for teens and the Intuitive Eating Journal, your guided journey for nourishing a healthy relationship with food, and a chapter contributor to the Handbook of Positive Body Image and Embodiment, as well as chapter contributor to Weight and Wisdom, Reflections on Decades of Working for Body Liberation. She has published journal articles, print articles, and blog posts. Elyse does regular speaking engagement podcast interviews and extensive media interviews. Elyse's philosophy embraces the goal of reconnecting with one's internal wisdom about eating and developing body liberation, with the belief that all bodies deserve dignity and respect. She is a social justice advocate, a member of the Healer Circle of Project Heal, Help to Eat, Accept, and Live, and consults with and trains health professionals. Elyse is also a certified eating disorder specialist and consultant. And
Mm.
I am so excited to have Elyse with us today. How
Oh,
are
thank
you?
you. I'm good. Thank you, Amy, for having me.
Oh, yes, I'm just grateful that you agreed to be here today. I know it's a
Yes.
busy time of year for sure for many of us. So I just wanted to start with that was a wonderful brief bio. You've done so many things. Yeah.
Not so brief. Not so brief. Lots of things. Yes.
Yeah, lots of wonderful things. So I think what I'd like to get started with today, if it's okay with you, is um, for any listeners that might be listening to this, um, they may not know what intuitive eating even is, or maybe they've heard of it. Maybe they've heard of intuitive eating and have an idea. But I know personally, I've heard people, mention intuitive eating, and um, they don't always really truly know what it is. So is there a simple description that you can give about intuitive eating?
Couple of simple descriptions. First of all, it's important to know that it's based on true evidence of looking at toddlers who are eating. If you give them a variety of food, you don't tell them what to eat, not or what not to eat. At the end of a week, they get fully nourished. So this is internal wisdom. We are all born with knowing when we're hungry, knowing when we're full, and when solid food gets introduced, what we like and what we want to throw on the ground. So, intuitive eating is based on that. In terms of the actual definition, I like to call it a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. And that's based on three parts of the brain: the instinctual survival part of the brain that just wants to keep us alive. It doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have thoughts, it's not responsible for feelings or thoughts. Um, and the limbic part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, and our emotions so affect our instincts, our hunger, we're affected all the time by feelings. And then the third part is the neocortex or the thinking part of the brain. So intuitive eating is a self-care, self-compassionate process for reconnecting with that internal wisdom, utilizing all these aspects of the brain. I
Great.
don't know if that's simple enough or too complicated,
No,
Amy.
no, I think that's great. And I like that it was concise and brief, so that people can go, oh, okay, because I do think there's quite a few misconceptions, of people that haven't read the book on intuitive eating. And I definitely even like just in Google searches will find some interesting descriptions sometimes. So
Yeah, it's often misconstrued as the hunger fullness diet. There are 10
yes.
principles that help guide people through intuitive eating. They are not rules, they're just kind of guidelines is what, is how they're framed. And two of them are, being in touch, honor your hunger and find your
Hmm.
fullness. But those are only two of the 10 principles. And so intuitive eating is certainly not only about hunger and fullness. And that's a big,
Right.
misconception. And it's also available for treatment. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a certified eating disorder specialist, and there's a lot of misinterpretation in the eating disorder community that, oh, you can't use intuitive eating in treating people with eating disorders because they're disconnected from their hunger and fullness. That's true, but there's so
Hmm.
many other aspects of intuitive eating that can be presented and worked with from day one, such as rejecting diet culture and making peace with all foods. And I can go on and on with that if we want to talk about the principles. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other misconception is that intuitive eating is just another way to lose weight, just another diet.
Hmm.
And it is the complete opposite of that. So,
Yeah. Well, and with that, since you brought that up, in all, in all your experience with clients, with the principles, do you think that letting go of the diet culture is that one of the most difficult principles for people,
oh
would you
yeah, I
say?
mean, it's pervasive. It is unrealistic. It's unattainable. The goal set of diet culture to have a certain idealized body, and it's
Hmm.
all over, and it gets very confused of late with wellness culture, or connected. I shouldn't say confused. They're very connected, and the idea that to be healthy you have to be a certain size. So the wellness culture tells you what foods are good and what foods are bad. Actually, it's
Hmm.
kind of orthorexic some of the time. Orthorexia being uh, an eating disorder that's not in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual, but it is certainly an eating disorder where people will try to only eat certain foods that they think are healthy. It's a control mechanism usually. It's not set out for weight loss, but ultimately it often accompanies it because people start eliminating a lot of foods that they think are not healthy. And it's understandable. We all are looking for some form of control in this uncontrollable world. So sometimes people will go to that. They'll hear things that if you eat this way, you'll live longer. If you eat that way, you will not have certain diseases, and so they're swept into that, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, I was thinking about, the concept of not restricting foods, you know. I
Yeah.
think people tend to have a hard time with that too, would you say? Would you agree?
Well, I think so, and I think really the reason is they don't trust their bodies because
Hmm.
they've been on so many restrictive eating journeys that once they take something away and then ultimately it's not sustainable and they end up eating things they've told themselves that they can't have, whether for quote unquote health reasons or weight loss reasons, then those take on such a big meaning. They've been forbidden, they get excited to have them, and they can't stop eating them. And so they say, oh, no, 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 I cannot make peace with all foods because if you tell me I can eat, I don't know, hot fudge sundae, I'm going to eat one all day, every day.
Right. Right.
And I have a friend who says to me, I have a lot of friends who have just never read the book and have their own ideas about things. But she said, if you told me I could eat steak every day, I wouldn't stop eating steak. And it's like, try it, see what happens. Because the antidote for the fear around that is something called habituation, which
Right.
basically means the greater the stimulus, the less the response. So the more you have availability, the more you give yourself permission to have whatever you want to eat. And sidebar, caveat, obviously there are so many people in this world who do not have access to enough food or to
Yes,
enough choices. So I want to keep that in mind. And this is a systemic world problem that
of
has
course.
to be addressed. But if you have the privilege to be able to get whatever foods that you do like and enjoy, and you never forbid them, what ends up happening is they're there. They're just there. I mean, I've got bags of
Right.
potato chips on the top of my refrigerator because I was craving potato chips a month or two ago, and I forgot to even open them because I have no, restriction around them. And so helping people understand that the more you give yourself permission to eat whatever you want, as much as you want, whenever you want, no rules here. It just kind of takes its place. And
Right.
that's what,
And I think
yeah,
they just have the fear that, like you said, oh, I'm going to eat steak every day, always then, because, but yeah, I mean, you're going to get tired of it. I mean, I've
Well,
experienced it myself, right? It's like, oh, I'm so over that, right? Yeah.
yeah, and especially
Yeah.
if there's a fear of deprivation of something, for example, a holiday food that you only get once a year.
Right.
Well, you want to just pile that in because you're not going to get it the rest of the year. Maybe you're going to visit grandma somewhere who makes a particular kind of cookie,
Right.
and you just want to eat as many of them as you can get your hands on because you might not have them again. So for the most part of my four favorite words, there's no perfection here. For the
Yes.
most part, if you can get access to, the variety of foods that you love, they'll just take their proper place in your life and you won't be afraid of them.
Well, and thank you for that, Elyse. And I think one of the things, you brought up holidays and that, with the holidays
Mhm.
upon us, right? I know that sometimes people get nervous about food
Mhm.
around the holidays, and maybe it has like some trigger type things that happen for people. So, because the holidays, sometimes bring fear of overeating or weight gain.
Mhm.
For people, what would you say to someone who might be anxious, being in the midst of the holidays right now around
Well,
food?
first of all, to have a lot of self-compassion for their emotions, because holidays often mean being around people that don't necessarily feel safe for them, people who may have given them messages all of their lives that their bodies weren't acceptable or their food wasn't acceptable, and we can't create the perfect, guest list
Right.
of places we go, and we want to not avoid them because there are people we want to see and we want to, celebrate. So, first of all, that's self-compassion and self-care with that. I like to talk about preparation and rehearsal is a phrase I've used. Prepare for the event, think about it,
Mm,
rehearse how you're going to get through it, create some, you know, like escape mechanisms if you're feeling that it's getting to be too much. Even if you have to say, I have to go to the bathroom, just get up from the
hmm
table and leave for a bit, take a few deep breaths, call a friend, take a walk, do something like that so that you give yourself a moment to kind of regroup because it can be very difficult. So that's the emotional part of it.
hmm
And I think that in anticipation of it, a lot of people just don't eat enough. They say, "Oh yeah, I'm not gonna eat today because I've got this big meal
Right.
coming at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock." Well, that's just a setup. I
hmm
mentioned earlier the survival part of the brain. So the survival part of the brain senses when quote unquote the organism is in danger, red alert, which means if you're not getting nourishment from the outside, that part of the brain is going to do everything it can do to keep you alive. So if you
hmm
haven't eaten all day, what's going to happen is that the that part of the brain is going to release a chemical called neuropeptide Y, NPY, and that chemical is there to get you to eat as much as you can of calories and carbs.
hmm
And so eating regularly throughout the day, not necessarily going into the meal full because we want to have an appetite and enjoy
Right.
it, but
Sure.
certainly, having breakfast, having lunch, having a snack if the meal's going to be later. The Thanksgiving I went to, I was told that there were going to be appetizers at 4 o'clock, so come at 4. Well, there was no food until 5:30. So it was a good thing I had eaten a couple
Yeah.
times during the day, and I always carry things in my purse. So if I'd gotten too hungry, I could have walked in the other room and had some nuts or a bar or
hmm
something like that. So definitely prepare for it by eating enough so you're not setting yourself up neurochemically for feeling out of control is a really important piece of it. And one hopes that you've been working for a long time with not having judgment about certain foods, but certainly at this time, if you have been thinking, oh no, I shouldn't be eating pie or I shouldn't be eating stuffing or whatever it is happens to be. We're past Thanksgiving, but it could also be on a Christmas
hmm
table. You want to really look at that, giving yourself permission to eat whatever
hmm
you want. Something I like to say, and by the way, for your audience, I have a Master of Science degree in nutrition, so
hmm
I like to look at it scientifically much of the time. And basically, all foods break down to carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and if they're protein, nitrogen. So the
hmm
idea that this food is good and this food is bad, it doesn't make any sense. Sure, some foods have phytochemicals, vitamins, minerals, more fiber, there's things in addition, but otherwise, foods just are just there to nourish us. And so by making peace with all food, and not judging food and not having good and bad foods, you're going to enjoy your meal. Might you eat more than you typically do? Sure, because
Right.
maybe there's some foods there that you don't always have and they're particularly delicious. Okay, cool.
Hmm.
Your body will just know and, guide you to your hunger and fullness signals, assuming you have been eating regularly beforehand.
Right.
So, yeah, that week of a holiday is not the first time that you want to start feeding yourself regularly throughout the day. This is something that we need to do every day.
Yes,
And I like to
absolutely.
also look at it from, looking at babies. I mean, babies need to be fed every few hours, and they know when they're hungry and they cry.
Hmm.
And if you try to force more milk in them, whether it's a breast or bottle, they're going to turn their little heads or spit it up or
Right.
whatever. So, we do have that in us. It's just been so taken away from us. And to go back to your previous question, Amy, about diet culture, we're bombarded constantly
Hmm.
by
Hmm.
messages that are counter to being intuitive and trusting your inner wisdom. So it's a fight.
Yes.
I understand, and I am committed to this. Obviously, that first edition of Intuitive Eating you mentioned we're in the fourth and going into the fifth. First edition came out in 1995,
Hmm.
starting to be written in 1993. So we're talking about a long time ago, over 30 years ago. I have been committed to changing the world if I can. It's a pretty mighty goal, but in every little possible way I can, whether it's doing these podcasts or writing the
Hmm.
books, talking to my clients individually. I believe we're all connected. This is kind of a spiritual statement. I think we're all connected
Hmm.
internally. From our unconscious, perhaps. I don't know. I can't
Yeah.
explain it exactly, but I just have the sense that we all are connected. So each person that can be affected by this, who can touch another person, who can touch another person,
Yes.
the word gets out. I get emails all the time from people who've read the book. I've never met them. And it says that
Right.
they say that it's changed their lives. So little by little, I'm working through this.
Right.
Hopefully
That's how
we'll
we
continue.
connected. I
Yeah,
emailed you. Yes.
yes, that's
Yes.
right.
I'm like, I read the
Exactly.
book. Yes.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we do have to fight diet culture because
Yes.
it's really basically based on the patriarchy and racism, diet culture.
Yes. It
And
absolutely is. Yep.
so we're trying to fight that as well. And I'm one of these, strong feminists who went through the second wave of feminism back in the early 70s, Gloria Steinem, Ms. Magazine, all of that. And, we all have a right to our own individuality and autonomy. And intuitive
Yes.
eating is so much about autonomy.
Yes. Well, you mentioned the book and written first in 1993. Yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the starting the writing. I mean, we signed the contract
Yes.
in 93, started the writing, and it was released. It takes, for your audience, it takes 2 years for a book typically to be released after you sign a contract. So,
Okay.
yeah, it came out in mid 1995. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that, I actually was going to ask you about that because I think our listeners would be interested to see where intuitive eating started and how it has morphed to today, like the
Yeah.
changes that have come and like what was it like, back in 1993 when you started writing about it? Like where did it come from? Just kind of the history of all of it
Well,
and
I
how
think we
it's
have to go back to 1982 when I started my practice.
okay.
I was planning on working with children with developmental disabilities because I did a year's traineeship through a program uh, with Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, university affiliated program. It was for child development and developmental disabilities. And I just thought this was a wonderful area to be working with. And I was running their feeding clinic. And after I did they called it a traineeship, it's an internship, it was a year long. I continued working there for a while. And I thought, this is great. When I go into private practice, this is the work I want to do. Well, best laid plans. I wasn't
Mhm.
getting the referrals. The regional centers in California, which provide payment for people with disabilities, were not really willing to pay for, a nutritionist. And so I ended up getting lots of referrals from the medical world, which is awfully weight centric.
Mhm.
Doctors in their training are not getting weight inclusive, information.
Right.
It's starting to change. There are two organizations. There's one for medical students, and there's one for doctor who've already become doctors of weight inclusivity. I can later give you the link to that if you want to put
Yes,
that
that'd
in
be
your
great.
notes.
Yes. Yes.
So there's some hope for that. But the traditional medical world is so based on based on weight loss, and so I get referrals from doctors sending me someone with either hypertension or high cholesterol or diabetes, and
Mm-hmm.
it was always help them lose weight. And
Mm-hmm.
it never felt right to me. It just, internally, it was a queasy feeling. Number one, I didn't know how to do that, really. I mean, in graduate school, you're given a tiny amount of training about, well, just give out a meal plan, take away the
Right.
autonomy, tell people what to eat, and they'll follow it.
Right.
Well, guess
Yep.
what? That doesn't really work. So I did connect with my clients. I did help them, maybe make changes for adding certain foods in with, say, high cholesterol. Well, let's add in some oatmeal and some beans. It helps, helps your cholesterol. But
Right.
I didn't like the idea of we have to focus on weight loss, but I did it. And I have to say that remember that Maya Angelou quote? Oh, I have it here somewhere. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So I
Yes.
have to give myself grace for that. I really didn't know, other than intuitively, it just didn't feel right to me.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a defining moment somewhere in the first couple of years of my practice where I was working with a young woman who had told me that she was pretty out of control with her eating and she wanted to lose weight, So I gave her
Mm-hmm.
this meal plan. She came back and she said, I've been binging all week. And I didn't know what to do with it. I was very uh, troubled by that. And that was at the same time I was reading some of the early literature about non-diet concepts, which would be let people eat whatever they want to eat. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
as a dietitian, I'm a registered dietitian, nutrition therapist. Well, how can I tell people to eat whatever they want to eat? I know that
Right.
certain foods have more nutrient value than others,
Right. Sure.
but I was also very interested in psychology. I mean, little fact, I've had 40 years of therapy. So I've been really interested in that and in the human psyche. And I started to really understand that by telling people what to do, they were going to do the opposite, which is
Mm-hmm.
human nature. So little by little, my mind started moving into a direction of I need to write a book to, counter this. And interestingly, my son at the time, he was away at boarding school. He was 15, and he called me one day and he said, Mom, I just read this book that you have to read. And I said, okay, what? It was called The Tao of Pooh, being Tao, which is Taoism.
Oh, yeah.
And it was explained through Winnie the Pooh, through the concept of Winnie the
Oh,
Pooh. So of course,
yeah.
you do what your children tell you to do. And I went out and I bought the book and read it, and it was like a lightning rod because
Mm.
what it was. Well, I'll give you a little bit of the example of what happened in the book. So there was going to be a race between Pooh and I believe it was Eeyore. I could have the character
Okay.
wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
the two of them are starting to race to get to this end point. And Winnie starts meandering along, looking at the flowers, thinking how wonderful it is to be out in nature. And Eeyore starts racing, and Eeyore stumbles over a rock, and Winnie wins the race. He gets to the end sooner by allowing himself to be in process, to go through
Mm-hmm.
this path of his enjoying life. And I thought, wow, this is about not trying to control things. This is about
Mm-hmm.
staying present, getting satisfaction, enjoying life. And so I started to write a book, and I was going to entitle it The Tao of Eating. I think later I found there is a book by that name. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started putting some chapter headings down and thoughts down. And just through a synchronistic event, my co-author, Evelyn, she was renting some space for me in my office. She lives an hour away and was coming up to LA once a week to see a client. And so we, got to know each other. I'd not known her
Mm-hmm.
before. And one day she was walking down the hall and I was walking the opposite way. And I looked at her and I thought, something's wrong. I'm very intuitive. Something's
Yeah.
wrong. And I said, Evelyn, what's the matter? And she said, oh, I'm so frustrated. I'm trying to write this book with a psychologist who doesn't know how to write. So another light bulb went off, and it's like, okay, well, I'm really good in psychology, even though I'm not a psychologist. I know a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
psychological science and all of that. And in that moment, I said, I'll write it with you. Because she was clearly saying that she had a certain skill that she wanted to put in, and she was looking for a psychologist to put in the psychological pieces of it. And that's how it began. That's how we
Mm-hmm.
decided to work together. And she had similar ideas and we just collaborated. And that was
Wow.
where the first book came from.
Wow.
Long story, not
No,
big.
that's great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think the our listeners will be really interested to hear that where it all began. That's great.
Yeah.
And then since you wrote that first book, how has it morphed? I mean, you're in process of your fifth
Right.
edition
Right.
right now. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something about publishers. They want to make money. So
Of course.
they're not going to continue to offer, the opportunity to write the next edition, if the first one
Hmm.
hasn't been popular. So clearly people were reading it, and clearly
Hmm.
they were making money on the book.
Yes.
So we were given the opportunity to write the second edition. And interestingly, and I want to tell anybody who has the first or second edition, throw it away. Just
Oh yeah.
use it for fire for the well, no, we can't in California, we can't burn
Right,
anything from,
right.
but it's because the second edition is identical to the first edition, except I wrote a chapter on eating disorders. And
Okay.
that's what was added to that. It was in the third edition where we started to make some significant changes, and
Hmm.
certainly the fourth edition. And now writing the fifth edition, we're looking at this book and we're going, God, this is really poorly written. How do we publish this book? Because we are going over it word for word, letter for letter, tooth and
Sure.
nail, really updating it, changing it. I'm writing a whole new eating disorder chapter. I'm writing a whole new chapter on raising kids and teens as intuitive eaters.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
each edition, it evolves, and this should be it. I don't know
Yes,
that
it
there's
should.
much
You think
more.
this is it? Yes.
And then we had always thought, boy, we should do a workbook. Wouldn't that be great?
Hmm.
And we got an offer from a different publishing company to write a workbook. And oh, I jumped right in when we got that, and we wrote the first edition of the Intuitive Eating Workbook. That now is in its second edition that came out this
Yes.
January this year. And that just takes the principles and the concepts and gives the reader activities, they call them activities versus
Hmm.
exercises, to do some deep thinking and make some changes. So
And
it's a
it's
companion.
lovely. I read your fourth edition of the
Uh-huh,
book and then
uh-huh,
your second edition of the
uh-huh.
workbook.
Yeah.
I believe my family member might have. When did your third edition come out? Do you
The
remember?
third edition, let's see, the fourth edition I think came out in 2020. So the third edition, 2012 maybe,
Okay, so
or
I think my
20,
family member
yeah.
had read maybe the third edition. So, but yeah, the fourth edition was great to me. It sounds like you think it needed to work,
It needed
and
a lot of
yeah,
updating.
and the
Uh-huh.
workbook is lovely, and I like, and correct me on anything if I'm wrong here, but I like that the workbook can be a standalone if people have not read the book yet.
Yeah, it gives you a more of a bird's eye view, but enough of it to really understand
Yes,
intuitive eating. Plus, the new workbook has a chapter on social justice, and as you read in my little bio, that I'm very, very connected to wanting to promote social justice in our world, and I
yes.
I look at diet culture as promoting oppression for people in bodies that don't
Mm,
meet, the societal the
standard, yes.
standards the dye culture presents. So, and then excitingly, let me tell your audience, I'm about to
Yeah,
have an intuitive eating app is in testing phase
yes,
right now. Any moment it will be in beta testing. Right now, it's been going from the developer back and forth with all kinds of mistakes that have had to be corrected.
yes. Yeah,
And
that's part
that
part of that process. Yep.
yeah, and that will be
Yeah.
a real companion. It's called Intue, Intue, which comes from the word intuition. And anybody who would like to kind of sign up for notifications, the website is intue.app, www.intue.app. And that it's just a place where you can get notifications for when it will actually be in the Apple Store. I think it's being tested in the Apple Store as well. So, and it'll be on other platforms. So it will be a companion. And for people who have never read the books, or some people just don't like reading, and some people don't even like listening, and they don't learn
Hmm.
that way. But our younger generation seems to have their cell phones Velcroed to their
Right.
pockets,
Right.
or their hands maybe. And so this is a way for a lot of people who who learn somehow through their phones to be able to
Right.
pick it up and go through a process. The app takes you all the way through intuitive eating, and with, the background of it and the importance of it, and all the principles, and again exercises and things to do. It'll be interactive, and eventually there will be many iterations of it, and eventually
Hmm.
we want to have the app hook people up with certified intuitive eating counselors. So
That's great.
Evelyn and I have a training program where health professionals, educators are able to become certified as intuitive eating counselors.
Yes, and I recently got certified, which is
Yes, you did.
exciting. Yes.
Congratulations,
Yes.
Amy. So
Yeah.
it'll be wonderful ultimately for people to be able to find someone who is
That's
qualified.
great.
Because as you said earlier, Amy, there are so many people out there who think they know what intuitive eating is and can really lead people down the wrong path because they
Yes.
haven't done the work to understand it fully.
Right. Well, and as you said, some people just like maybe they don't have time to read, or maybe they don't learn well reading, or
Right.
or even the workbook. So yeah, the app is a great option for people. I did want to ask you, thank you for giving me the website for how they can get in contact that because I was going to ask. But also I was going to ask for our listeners, can anyone sign up for that? Do they need to be somebody that knows a lot about intuitive eating or
Oh, no, no, anyone can. I think if
okay,
someone has a severe eating disorder, this is not the place for them to go. They need treatment, higher level of care. But
okay,
so many people have disordered eating, not necessarily
right,
a, diagnosable eating disorder, and their disordered eating is really coming from diet culture. So this app will take them all the way through, even if they know nothing about intuitive eating.
great,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, wonderful. Well, boy, you really have come a long way since 1982, since your
Yes.
idea all started. And it sounds like the universe was just working with you, with connecting you with Evelyn. And yeah, for both of you, yeah, brought you together. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is so interesting when two people write together, they can either be exactly on the same path or they can have be on the same path but have different skills
hmm,
and or different interests in particular. My co-author Evelyn is brilliant in the world of research, and she just loves research studies. In fact, in our working on the book, every other paragraph, she wants to us to put another research study in to
right.
validate
Why
it.
not? Yes.
Well, there are now well over 200
Yes,
scientific studies, evidence-based, really good studies validating intuitive eating as a process that can increase physical and mental health. Talk about
yes.
health, and we were talking earlier about, wellness culture. Intuitive eating is the way to go. And there's also a book that was recently written by Janice Dada, which is called Intuitive Eating for Diabetes. And
Hmm.
so there's there's such misinformation about how to treat diabetes as well. And intuitive
Yes,
eating, there's been studies that have shown much better blood sugar control with intuitive eating than being on some sort of restrictive, restrictive plan, or people thinking they have to lose weight, or people thinking that they can't have carbs, when they have diabetes. And
right,
it's just not true.
right.
Then there's going to be another intuitive eating book that I just know well about and will be involved a little bit, not in the writing, but in maybe consulting on
Hmm.
intuitive eating in sports. So,
Oh,
there's,
great.
we can find intuitive eating in all areas of life.
Yes.
So,
Well,
yeah.
so I was gonna ask you, you did write the foreword, right, for the Intuitive Eating
I
Diabetes
wrote the
book.
foreword
Yes,
for the intuitive
yes,
eating for diabetes book. I
yes,
did. Yes.
yes,
Yes. That was
yes,
fun. That was wonderful. I loved reading that book because it's so affirmative in terms of self-care and not
yeah,
buying into diet culture if someone has diabetes.
yeah.
So.
Well, I think yeah, I'm just kind of amazed. I'm just processing all like the journey that it's how it started and where it is today. And I know that,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, Evelyn, you both like offer some training and supervision that
Mhm.
comes along with that as people are
Yes.
learning to
Yes.
be intuitive eating counselors. And
Yes.
yeah,
And in
and
fact, that supervision piece is not only for when people are learning to be counselors. I do supervision for many people who have been counselors for a long time, but they've got some tough case or something and they want to
Yes,
talk
absolutely.
to me about
Yes.
it. And I also run a supervision group that I've been doing for 18 years for professionals, but it's not as individualized as individual supervision is.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. And so do you I know in your book you mention that you think it's important for people to not only read the book but also have an intuitive eating counselor to kind of guide them on their journey
If it's po if they po
if
if
it's
it's possible,
possible.
some people just don't have the funds to do that because it
Sure.
does,
Well,
you
yeah,
have to pay
absolutely. It costs
professionals.
money.
And
Yes. Yes.
so it's a matter of, in the best of all worlds, having a certified intuitive eating counselor, having a psychotherapist as well, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely.
Reading the book, having sessions, challenging so many myths that have been around for so long about eating, and really looking at neuroplasticity in terms
Hmm.
of these neural pathways that have been developed for some people since they were very young,
Yes.
about how they think about food and body, building new neural pathways. So the old ones will start to, fade away, one hopes, and they're thinking in a different way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do know that the intuitive eating website, which I actually can include on here at the bottom of the podcast too, I'll put some different links on there. Um, I know that people can go to the website, and if they do feel like they want an intuitive eating counselor or even want to explore that, there is a directory on there, and you can kind of find people in your area or at least close to
Yes, you
your
put in
area.
your zip code, and
Hmm.
also there's an intuitive eating community. I'm not sure if you know about that, Amy, and you
Yes,
can sign
yes.
up for that on the website as well.
Hmm.
So people, who want to get support with their peers,
Yes. Yeah, that's
can do
great.
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so with that, if listeners want to make a first step to like a simple step toward becoming an intuitive eater, if they feel like, goodness, I think this is something I want to look into, what would you suggest as a very first step?
The first step is to ask themselves, what has it done for me to stay in diet culture, to follow diets, people will say to me, oh, but they work. Well, for a while, and then they don't.
Hmm.
So it's to have a really deep thinking period of how has it helped me to stay connected to that belief system, and how has it harmed me?
Yeah.
And more often than not, people will see that there's much more harm done. And so, as the whole concept of readiness for change, we have to be in a place where we're motivated to make
Yes.
change. And I think looking at the downside of diet culture and what it has done to make people feel really bad about themselves and not help them with their relationship with food and their body, and then looking at the hope of something new. And I will say, I've had people say to me, yeah, I've hated dieting, but I didn't know there was any other way. And so this
Right.
intuitive eating offers a whole different way of thinking about food and living one's life in your body and in your relationship with food. So that would be the first step. Just do that deep dive before you jump in, because if you're just like, well, I'll try this thing, and like if it doesn't work, then I'll, go back to what I was doing. It's never going to be effective because you never really fully decided that that other way of doing things is never going to work for you. So
Hmm.
once you're at that place where you're motivated and you want to learn something new, I would say get the fourth edition of Intuitive Eating, because the fifth edition won't be out until 27. And we're
Yes, it'd be
almost
a
at
little while.
26, so I'll be
Yes.
able soon be able to say next year it'll be out. But
And I will
at
say, I
this
think the
point,
fourth edition is great. So,
thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. So, yeah, start with that. And then if, as you mentioned earlier, Amy, it's just too much to read that whole book with all the studies in it, go to the workbook, the second edition
right.
of the workbook, definitely the second edition. You will get a much broader view of intuitive eating. It won't be quite as specific in terms of studies, for example, but it will give you a sense of that. Now, if you have a teenager at home, or if you are a teenager, I don't know if you have any teenagers who are listening, any adolescents,
Hmm.
my intuitive eating workbook for teens, I wrote
Yes.
that in teen language, essentially, like really speaking to their sense of they have no control in this universe at all, so much as being, if they're under 16, they can't drive, and they have curfews, and they have to be at school at certain times. And young people are so susceptible to obviously wanting to be accepted, and diet culture
Yes,
pervades in the high schools and the colleges.
absolutely.
So for young people under 18, I would say 18 or under,
Hmm.
although I was just working with it with an 18-year-old. Yeah, I think 18 or
Hmm.
under,
Hmm.
the workbook for teens will work. And then, that card deck, which is really kind of fun. I'm not sure if you have the card deck,
I
Amy, but
do. I do.
it's um it's a very brief kind of explanation of intuitive eating. But for some people, they might just want to pick that up. And I like to treat it like a tarot deck, just pull any card out,
Yeah.
and that card's going to give you some information because every card has something very important to say about intuitive eating. So there's lots of different
I love the
ways.
deck too because I feel like the deck is nice for like, as we know in our culture, so many people are just so busy and they're running from one thing to another.
Right,
And I
right.
think the card deck is something nice you could keep on your desk at work or something, and
Yeah.
or in your car or whatever, and just pull one out and,
And it's great
and read
Christmas
it.
presents, by the way.
Yeah, yes, that's a great idea. Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's really just kind of a nice thing for people that maybe are getting interested, right? In reading the book, but feel like, oh my goodness, I just don't have the time for something like that right now. Or yeah,
Yeah. And what I said earlier, I think is really important. We have to look at our motivations. Otherwise, we're not going to make
yes,
change. And
yes,
so, you're not going to be open to something different if you're just so committed to where you are. And maybe
yes,
this process of looking at the pros and cons, looking at that and saying, wait a minute, this isn't really working for me. It's not making me happy to stay stuck in diet culture and
right.
either formal dieting or just restriction.
Yes.
We live in a world of carb phobia, which just makes me laugh and cry at the
Hmm.
same time. For your audience, carbohydrates or glucose, which is the smallest form of carbohydrate, is the only form of energy that can get from your bloodstream into your brain. I mean, our
Yeah, it's
brain,
brain food. Yeah,
it is. And the
yeah.
idea that people are afraid of carbs makes me so sad. That's why I say
I know it.
I have to laugh and cry at the same time because it's like, really? I mean, we
Yeah,
need
and
this,
carbs are
you know?
delicious.
Oh my goodness. Well, they're the
Yes.
mainstay. Wasn't there a saying a long time ago that wheat is the staff of life or something like that? Or
Right. Yeah,
wheat bread, something
yes,
like that.
yes, something like that. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Well, in talking about the book and the workbooks and the card deck, for the journal that
Mhm.
you wrote,
Yes.
when is a good time, do you think, for people to utilize that?
Yeah, I think after you've done, gotten your initial understanding of intuitive eating, it goes deeper. It gives
Yeah,
opportunities for you to do your own writing. It's not like just a blank journal. Uh,
right.
there are prompts in there. There are things to think about, and then to go even deeper. So it's a process as we're talking. I haven't quite thought of it in the way that you're bringing it up, Amy. Thank
Hmm.
you. But it is a process. Get acquainted with intuitive eating, then go deeper with it. Do more of the
Hmm.
work, do the workbook, do the journal, and then just flip the card deck to see what you need to do on that
Yeah,
day. Right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have with clients in in my intuitive eating groups, I have if they have not read, many of them have not read the book when we start going through the workbook together. And I've suggested to them as we finish the workbook, this is great, but the book will really fill in even more information for you and can be helpful. So I've even had some of them do it backwards, and that has seemed to work too. And then
Great.
I've had some that are starting that enjoy the journaling process too after they finish the workbook and are reading at the same time they're doing the journaling too. So yeah.
And I think as we talk about it, what we're doing is we're trying to be inclusive of everybody's learning process.
Yes.
So there isn't one way to learn. And
Right.
so I'm hoping that all of these, possibilities for people gives them a place to go that's going to feel comfortable and the best for
Yes.
their learning abilities and,
Yeah.
and interests.
I love that because I feel like there's many, wonderful books out there and stuff, but not everybody learns that way. And so the fact that
Right.
you are providing these different ways for people to learn, I think is helping this important information get out there to folks.
Yeah, and it's part of the whole social justice, the concept of accessibility, of
Yes.
differences, and everybody is different, and let's be inclusive of, in this case, all learning types and all life situations. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been great. I loved hearing all the history, and then you shared some insight about holiday time, which I'm sure people will appreciate hearing, Elise.
Yeah, do the
Yeah.
preparation. Think about, prepare yourself. Think about it.
Yes.
Visualize. I'm sure people have heard of athletes who will visualize making, throwing the ball to get in the hoop.
Yes.
And visualization really is extremely helpful in terms of being able to be successful in something that could be very difficult. So prepare yourself. Prepare yourself both on the day, eating enough, and prepare yourself in advance, thinking about how you will respond to Aunt Lydia, who says, "Oh, you really
Right.
need that second piece of whatever,"
Right.
because well, there's one of the principles of intuitive eating is challenge the food police, and the food police are all over. I mean, whether it's
Yes.
diet culture or individual family members or social media, and preparing yourself for what you might say. For some people, they'll be able to say, "Look, I don't want to talk about food or." My body
Right.
at all. For some
Right.
people, they just can change the subject. You say, "Oh, did you see Wicked?" Or did you, or whatever
Right.
it is, and
Right.
get the subject changed. Or sometimes people just have to leave the room for a moment.
Yes. Yeah. And
So,
I like that suggestion. Like if you just,
yeah.
yeah, I just have to step away.
So
Yeah.
prepare and rehearse and see yourself. I've asked people to visualize themselves at that, event, at that table. How are you going to
Hmm.
respond to it? And I think you'll feel far more prepared than just jumping in with having not even eaten all day and not,
Yes.
thinking about how you're going to handle some of the difficult, emotional things that will come up.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I want to ask you a couple more questions
Uh-huh.
too. One is we didn't go over the ten principles.
No.
We know there's 10 principles that are
Uh-huh.
guidelines, not
Right.
rules or
That's
right
right.
restrictions.
Uh-huh.
Um, but with thinking about the 10 principles in intuitive eating, do you feel like I'm asking this question because well, I'll say afterwards when you answer it, but um do you feel like intuitive eating really is a holistic approach, that it really looks at kind of everything about the person,
Oh,
and that's one
absolutely.
of the reasons it works so well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's looking at beliefs and challenging those beliefs. It's looking at how you are affected by living in our culture. It's looking at your history, your trauma history, your emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking at your relationship with foods and, enjoyment. One of my favorite principles is satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I often start with. I mean, obviously, the first piece is let's just challenge diet culture. But
Right.
moving
Yes.
into intuitive eating, I have often asked people, do you think you deserve to feel satisfied in your meal or to have satisfaction? I cannot tell you how many people say no because they grew up in homes where they were, put down for wanting to
Shame
enjoy
and guilt.
food. Yeah,
Yep.
shame and guilt and all of that. And I'm thinking of one client I had a while ago who I think she was in her 60s, and her entire life she was dieting and feeling bad about herself, and the idea of satisfaction, it was strange to her. She was never
Mm-hmm.
really allowed to enjoy
Yeah.
food, enjoy life so much, and she just blossomed with this process.
Yeah.
It's intuitive eating goes to intuitive living. I mean, once you
Yes.
get so in touch with your inner signals, interoceptive awareness is a term that's one
Yes.
of the foundations of intuitive eating, which is, being able to recognize and attune to the messages your body gives you.
Yes.
And, people often will miss even like having to go to the bathroom. They'll wait for 2 hours before they go pee, and
Yes.
or they'll be so sleepy, but they won't take a nap, or they won't
Right.
go to bed early enough. So it's, listening to all of those
Yeah.
messages, which is
Yeah.
really important. And then this going back to the satisfaction. I mean, wow, when you have true satisfaction with eating, it really guides you. Actually, I call it the hub of the wheel because it's the
Mm-hmm.
middle, it's what affects all the principles or they interact, I would say. So I've got this funny thing that I'll ask people. I'll say, so tell me, would you eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on your way to your favorite restaurant for dinner? And most people look at me and go, really, Elise, come on. Of course not. And I'll say, well, why? And they say, well,
Mm-hmm.
because I won't be hungry. I won't enjoy my meal. It's like bingo. Okay. So understanding that having an appetite gives you more pleasure and satisfaction in your meal.
Yes.
And the converse, if you haven't eaten all day and you go into
Hmm.
that meal, what's going to happen? You're going to eat every roll in the bread basket, which, by the way, I judge restaurants based on their bread because I love bread and it's got to be
Right,
great.
right.
But, eating every roll in the bread basket means when the meal comes, you're already feeling full and not going to enjoy the meal.
Right.
So it really helps you look at hunger. It helps you look at fullness. Once you meet that place where you're comfortably full, tends to be the same place where food doesn't taste as good as it did in the beginning.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
something called sensory specific satiety, and if you say that fast, it doesn't work.
Right.
It comes from the field of hedonics or pleasure, the
Hmm.
study of pleasure. And the participants in the studies will be given a food and they have to judge the food bite by bite as to its pleasantness, which is another way of
Hmm.
talking about satisfaction. After 2 minutes, a particular food loses some of its pleasantness.
Right.
Now, we tend to eat mixed meals, so we don't get tired of food in 2 minutes. But in any case, it seems to be a very similar place when you are comfortably full. The food just, it's still good, but it's just not as good as
Right.
it was in the beginning.
Right. When initially, yes, those first few bites. Yep.
And may I throw in at this point, I know I'm kind of
Yeah.
taking it away from your questions, but um, people say to me, yeah, but I don't want to stop eating. I mean, even
Hmm.
though. And so I have a concept that I came up with, gosh, I would say probably 18 years ago. 18 years ago? I don't know, maybe more like 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but I call it the sadness of saying enough. And it came from working
Hmm.
with a teenager who didn't want to stop eating. And
Yeah.
I said, well, if you need this much food and then you're eating beyond that, what's that part beyond the amount your body needs? And
Hmm.
he said, I just don't want to feel sad to stop. And so it's acknowledging that moment where there's this, I call it emotion light. It's not,
Hmm.
deep trauma. It's in that
Right.
moment that, oh, this was so good and I just don't want to stop. And being able to understand that if you've made peace with all food, then you get to eat again and it'll be even more delicious when you have an appetite again. So this
Yes.
is just a small way I can look at all the principles if we had the time, but how they
Hmm.
all interact. It's really so
Yes.
satisfaction though is really key.
Yes, a big key to it. And I feel like I asked you that question about the holisticness of all the principles
Yeah.
because I really do feel like, I mean, there's even parts in there about kind of accepting yourself, to respecting your body
Yes.
mentally also, right?
Yeah.
And emotionally. And yes, and I think yeah, the respect your body part is a really important piece too.
Yeah. Every
Yeah.
every principle is
It
really
is. It
important.
is. Yeah. But I do
Yes.
really feel like
Yes.
it's a very
It
holistic
all.
approach that,
Yes.
and one of the many reasons that I think it works so well. But there's so many, like, not restricting and all that. But we could probably talk for
Oh yeah.
days about
Oh yeah.
this.
My favorite
But
subject.
yes, yes. Yes, so but I really appreciate it, Lisa. And I think the last thing that I'll say, first of all, is there anything you want to share before we close? And then the second one is, do you have one piece of advice for people who might be listening that are um, considering getting the book, taking a look at the app, things like
Well, my
that?
advice is really connected to what I said earlier. Take a moment to reflect.
Hmm.
Have you been happy with all the times you've tried to change your body and it rebounded and you
Yes.
didn't feel, you felt like you were a failure? I'll often say to people, no, you're not a failure. It's the dieting that's the failure. You're
Hmm.
not. Take a look at that. Ask yourself whether you can see a world where you can feel free from all of the negativity that comes with restriction and dieting. And I wanted to say that it's not simply, you know, formal diets that people go on, but just the idea of, oh, I shouldn't eat dessert or I shouldn't eat bread or it's any form of restriction. How has that made you feel?
Hmm.
Has it made your life better? And come to that place where you're able to say, yeah, I don't want to live like that any longer. And I
Hmm.
want to be liberated. This intuitive eating leads you to body liberation, where you are in an accepting place that, we're DNA programmed for our body sizes and shapes. And this effort to change it is futile. And to look at the freedom to enjoy food and not feel guilty, or shame, have shame. People hide food a lot because they feel so much shame for just wanting to eat foods that are yummy and delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and I love sugar, by the way. I eat I eat desserts and sweets, every day. And there's never judgment. And just
Hmm.
a tiny piece back in my, oh, I guess late 20s, early 30s, I had some disordered eating where I was dieting and I was binging. It was a diet
Hmm.
binge thing. And I remember going to my therapist at the time saying, "You think I have an eating problem?" And she said, "Well, do you throw up?" And I said, "No." She said, "You're fine." And I can't blame her. This is a long, long
Oh,
time
sure, of
ago.
course. Yeah, we've
But
learned a lot over the years.
this is
Yeah.
something I put into my work, and I'm very happy to talk to people about my own lived experience because I know what that feels like. And I
Hmm.
also know what it feels like to have over 40 years of a wonderful relationship with food and my body.
Hmm.
So that's what
Yeah.
I offer to people as well.
Well, Elise, thank you so much. It's such an honor, really. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait for the listeners to hear everything that you have to say.
Thank you. And if they want to find me, they can
Yes.
find me. I have a website, which is my name. It's
Yes.
Resch.com,
Hmm.
Elyseresch. There's also the Intuitive Eating website, which gives you more scientific information and the principles, intuitiveeating.org. And then the app, which is Intu.app. So we've got three different
Yes.
endings to that.
Great.
And I don't spend a lot of time on social media, but I do post on Instagram and put some stories up there. And so it's Elyse Resch on there. Same, just my whole name, Elyse
Yeah.
Resch.
So another place that you can be found
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. This is fun. I love talking about this.
Yes, it's
Thank
great.
you for inviting me, Amy.
Yes, thank you.